Hi, folks. Welcome to season 2, episode 12 of the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. Today, my guest is Emily Steines, and we're talking about energy budgeting to create a life with more joy and ease. First, a little bit about my guest. Emily is the founder of BoopBod. Her work combines science, spirituality, and somatics to help us disrupt self-sabotaging patterns and step into our true power and aliveness. She has over 15 years of experience as a life and embodiment coach. She's a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, an IN holistic health coach, an SFG kettlebell trainer, and a breathwork facilitator. Emily's mission is to help you unlock the wisdom and intelligence residing within your body, nervous system, intuition, and unconscious mind, reigniting your true essence and fulfillment. Welcome to the podcast, Emily. That is quite a resume.
Quite a mouthful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. Can you kick us off by just sharing what is energy budgeting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like even before going into what energy budgeting is, I just want to name the fact that we are all energy, like literally our muscles and tissues break down to our cells that break down to molecules and atoms and subatomic particles. And those particles it's literally energy, and that energy can't be created nor destroyed. We probably maybe remember that back in our early science classes. And there's a lot that impacts our energy. Like, it's not just about like, oh, I'm energized and I've got a lot of energy to go do the things I want to do, or I'm tired. That's definitely a piece of it. But when we think about the frequency or the state of our energy and the energy that we're in, that's impacted by our thoughts and emotions, that's impacted by our environment, that's impacted by the people we surround ourselves with, that's impacted by even the food we ingest, the news and information that we take in. It's impacted by so many different things. So when it comes to energy budgeting, it's thinking about like, what are we expending? What are we saving? What are we investing? Like, how is that energy in versus energy out practice happening? And for most of us, if we're not thinking about it or being intentional, we're kind of just like, I always think about, we're just like moving through life, like bouncing from one thing to the next and reacting, as opposed to being really intentional about like where our boundaries are, what we actually are receiving and taking in that feels supportive versus receiving and taking in that kind of creates us to feel drained or depleted. So kind of the core of energy budgeting is really recognizing what we're taking in and what we're giving out, and maybe what we're reserving to protect our own energy. And again, that can connect to like feeling energized or feeling tired, or it can really impact our mood, our own confidence, the way that we feel about ourselves, the way that we interact with the world. It can kind of have this like ripple effect that impacts everything that we do and experience.
Yeah, amazing. And I thank you for clarifying that. It's interesting. I've been on a journey for the past 18 months I've been started working with a shaman, and I'm now training to be a shaman. And
Amazing.
I'm busy prepping for an ayahuasca ceremony in 10 days' time. And part of the preparation of that is starting to look at what you're eating. And that's, I mean, I stick to a mostly vegan diet, but I have not been very good with, I have a lot of sugar, and I've started to, read up on it and started to cut back on that, which is interesting, because I'm currently at the stage where I think my body would really like some sugar. And I was rummaging around the cupboard earlier. There is a chocolate bar in there, and I was going, no, have a handful of raw nuts, much better. So, but I think it's one of to come back to the point is, we're often very unconscious of what we are putting in our bodies and how that affects how we feel. And I think the journey I've been on of my own coaching journey is, and the coaching training I've done, is being very aware of starting to look at the clients I've got. Of a lot of them are feeling overwhelmed, they're depressed, they're very anxious. And I'm not a nutritionist, but starting to look at what are people eating, because 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut. And if you're filling your body with crap, it's no wonder your mind feels terrible. And I think it's beginning to help people put that connection into place. And I think so many people are disconnected from like you've said, from what you're eating, from the energy you're absorbing from other people, from the news. And this is a great conversation to be having, to remind people that you actually have a choice about
Mhm.
what you're ingesting, from all angles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Also, I just want to name, like, sending you all the love for your ayahuasca experience. That's so cool and
Thanks.
so beautiful that you're doing that.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I myself included in terms of living disconnected. That's like a huge piece of my story of, like, I was so
Mm-hmm.
disconnected that I, like, ended up hospitalized at some point. And it was like, because of this, I was very much stuck in that people pleasing or the overgiving or the perfectionist or the do and the grind mode, and just like so fixated unconsciously, like I wasn't aware of it at the time, but so fixated on all of those things and checking all those boxes that there really was no connection to self, no knowing of these signals, no, even though there were so many signs, like signals of me literally exhausted, depleted, having no energy, craving sugar, feeling
Yeah.
resentful to hang out with friends, like, like, or not resentful to hang out with friends, but resentful to do my job that I had once loved,
Yeah.
and then having a hard time even socializing or like wanting
Mm-hmm.
to hang out with my friends. Like, there
Mm-hmm.
were so many signs, right? And that's
Yeah.
it's it's if we don't, like, stop ourselves and actually check in, we can get to points where it's like we kind of hit our own rock bottom, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful for that moment. It really shifted the trajectory of my life. But, like, also, if we can prevent it, that would be amazing and help
Yeah.
us feel a little bit more empowered. But yeah, we really do have control over what we're taking in and what we're leaving out. And I like to think of them as like energy givers and suckers. And we get to, like, sit
Mm.
down and actually determine what goes on that list. And it gets to be very unique for you. It's probably not going to be the same list as mine or the same list as yours. And I think it's really important to even take some time to reflect on, like, what gives you energy, what drains your energy. Happy to give examples if you think it's helpful. But that's, like, I think that's one of the first steps when it comes to energy budgeting, is like, what goes on each side of, or each of those columns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can unfortunately also relate to having a bit of a wake-up call. I had a huge episode. It sounds to me from the what you've described that you had a big episode of burnout. I also had an episode of burnout in 2016, and I have never felt so awful. It was I think it probably is the worst experience of my life to date.
Mm,
It was horrendous. And I tried to push through the burnout and keep working, because I was in a stage, I've been running my own business for 20 years, and I'd got into a horrible pattern of kind of overgiving, under earning, running out of time, trying to do everything, not wanting to let anybody down, because I was worried that if I say no to somebody, I'm going to have no money, I'm going to have no clients. And I think this is such a familiar pattern for people. I tried to push through the burnout, and then the universe gave me a wonderful gift of a back injury, which made me, I ended up in hospital for 3 days. It made me lie down, and it made me wake up and realize, if I have no use of my body, I can't work anyway. I'm no use to anybody if I don't care for myself. But I
mm,
think this is something I hear, and I'm sure you hear often, is the same story of people don't listen, and we keep pushing through until everything collapses. And you actually, anybody listening here, I don't want to be dishing advice out or telling anyone how to do anything, but if you can take a lesson from this conversation, is that you don't need to let it get to the point where you're hospitalized, where you have a complete nervous system collapse. I was very lucky. I don't know what I did to my back, but it wasn't anything permanent. It was incredibly painful, but thankfully it wasn't a slip disc or anything, because my life literally flashed before my eyes.
mhm,
My other business, I'm a photographer, and I just thought, if I can't walk and if I'm in constant pain, I have no business. And I've been working so hard for what? Was the
mhm.
question that came up for me. And I think this is a question I would invite people listening to ask themselves. If you are working yourself into oblivion, for what? What are you doing it for? Because and it's a pattern I hear with people of, I'm going to enjoy life when I retire. But if you work yourself into oblivion, I've heard lots of people tell me things that people get to retirement age and then drop dead. life is precious and we have to enjoy it now, and it means making big changes. So I would love to hear, Emily, from you. What kind of changes can we start to make to energy budget more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, First of all, I just love everything that you said. And I think the the other piece of that is recognizing how much like what signals come up for us.
Yes.
So even as we're having this conversation and we're both sharing our experience of kind of hitting our own like rock bottom, like
Mm-hmm.
really very alarming wake up call that we hope other
Yeah.
people don't have to experience.
Yeah.
But hopefully also being able to witness these like little signals that surface
Yeah.
of whether that's like your signals for burnout or signals for me, just to name in case it resonates. Like I know for me, if I'm starting to feel like a lot of resistance or um like I'm literally like tightening my fist, like that's what it feels like in my body, like this gripping or this resistance or this forcing or trying to
Yeah.
control things in my world,
Yeah.
where there's like I'm really things aren't feeling in ease or flow,
Yeah.
or I'm not, it doesn't feel like I'm as easily able to like pivot or adjust when things don't go the way that I had envisioned, right? That
Yes.
like gripping piece, which then for
Yes.
me also there's some like frustration and anger that comes online. Whether or
Mm-hmm.
not I let myself express it, depending on the
Yeah.
day, is different.
Yeah.
But really, those are like my initial signals of like, wait a second, something is out of alignment here. Something isn't right. Let me slow down. Let me check in. Am I saying yes to things that actually are a no for me?
Yeah.
Am I trying to control something that's really out of my control? And I'm putting way too much energy into this thing that's just going to drain me when literally I have no control over it. Right. So starting to like maybe as we all navigate our days, like starting to recognize maybe what are some of those signals for us. I don't
Yeah.
know if you want to share any of yours, if you have any different ones before I go into some other
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad you brought that up. I think it's so important. So for me, a big signal that I'm heading to burnout is starting to get really irritated with clients. And I am somebody who I pride myself on giving great service to people. I mean, I shifted my business massively after my episode of burnout. So my business now looks very different to how it did then. But when I start to feel overloaded, I start to feel irritated. The slightest request, I want to send a reply that's not very polite, which is totally unreasonable. Nobody's asking to, when
Mm-hmm.
people, it's like, oh my God, if there's just one more request, I can't deal with it. I think when your cup is getting to the point of it's starting to overflow with too many things to deal with, that for me is a big signal that I know I recognize and think, hang on a minute, things aren't going so well, so I need to make some adjustments here. I need to push some timelines out. I need to start putting some more boundaries down. It's something I've got much better about, because as I don't ever want to experience what I experienced
Mm.
when I was burnt out again. But I
Yeah.
think it's so interesting. One of the things that comes up for me in coaching sessions with my clients is a lot of people actually aren't in touch with their bodies enough to pick up on these signals. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people end up so disconnected that you need to take a step back. And I know you're going to talk to us about this, and start to actually notice what's going on within your body so you can pick up sooner when things are out of whack, that it doesn't have to get to the stage where you're ready to tell a client to go stuff themselves. When they've not asked for anything unreasonable. Just trying to think other things. I think my anxiety will ramp up, and when I'm very
Mm-hmm.
anxious, I struggle to sleep. So I think that's quite a common symptom for
Yeah, it's a good
for
one.
people with burnout. I think we have to watch that burnout and depression have quite similar crossover symptoms. But I
Mm-hmm.
think, and I know for some people, when they're burnt out or in a kind of similar situation or anxious, I know some people sleep a lot more because it's almost a way of shutting down. Unfortunately for
Yeah.
me, that doesn't happen. So I end up not being able to sleep. And then it just fuels the cycle of being frustrated and irritated and not being able to cope when you're not sleeping properly. And I think that's how burnout, you sort of start to end up in a pattern where you're literally circling the drain with it, because all
Mm-hmm.
of the unhelpful signals, that's your body going, hello, I need a break, I need you to stop,
Yep.
When you try and fight through it, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think you're so spot on too in naming that like burnout and depression can kind of be hard to discern like which one we're at. And like I know you recently posted an episode on nervous system, kind of the basics of nervous system regulation. And it's one of my passions of sharing information too, because it's like
Yeah.
it's literally what's operating constantly. And if we can get in the driver's seat, it's like what a shift we can create in
Game
our
changer.
reality.
That's
It's a
it.
game
Yeah.
changer. And I think that along with some of the other things that I'll share are ways that we can actually start to reconnect to our
Yes.
body and to our knowing and to what are our own signals, whether it's an emotion, whether it's a physical sensation, whether it's
Yeah.
a thought that kind of is a repeating pattern that comes up when we're in a certain state. But yeah, with like the burnout and shutdown, it's kind of that when we're in that activated, like sympathetic, anxious, or fight or flight or hustle mode for too long, we
Yeah.
shift into it's the dorsal vagal, which is kind of that shutdown mode, which can be
Mhm.
very much the depression. And between those states is actually that freeze mode, which is
Yes.
that like there's so much internal anxiety. I have to, but like we aren't taking action.
Yep.
So it's really important to, we're both biased because we like this work is important to us, but I
Yeah.
really do think it can be life-changing information once we actually understand ourselves in this way. So
Yeah.
hopefully even in this conversation, I can give some tangible tips and things, and then, sharing other resources beyond that. But I also, before getting into the details, not to keep postponing it, but I really want to name how important it is that we have to like be willing to dismantle the expectations that we may have placed on ourselves or that we have
Yes.
learned from society. We have learned from, however many years of like saying I'm so busy or stacking on all of our responsibilities has become like this badge of honor
Yes.
when like I'm no longer living in that reality. Like that is not something I'm buying into. Like I am not going to celebrate myself for being stacked full from morning to night every
God,
single
no.
day of the week.
No.
So recognizing if that's a piece of your own worth or worthiness, right? We can go kind
Yes.
of into the unconscious piece here, but like
Yeah.
really recognizing maybe where and what you're attaching, like your good enoughness or your worthiness
Yes.
or what a success looks like to you, and
Yeah.
recognizing if it is going nonstop and trying to achieve the grind, the hustle, all
Yeah.
of that without any sort of rest or without play or without presence with yourself or your family, etc. So recognizing your own beliefs around that. And then I also want to name like the reality we live in today is not natural for humans, right?
Yeah.
Like we have never been meant to be like accessible 24/7. And so
Hmm.
whether that's you're an entrepreneur and you have clients, or whether that's your other, your 9 to 5 that you're working, even family members, like the fact that we have devices where we can connect is like so amazing and beautiful and brilliant. And at the same time, we get to decide when we're actually in communication or not. We get to decide our hours of like, I am from at this point in my day, I'm going to stay present with whoever's physically in my home, and I'm not engaging with anyone outside of that work or any incoming text related. Right. And I know I try to do a really good job of this, of like naming that, like I see a text, if it feels urgent, like I see this, I will respond tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
But also trusting like we all are in a reality that we're constantly being fed and bombarded. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes, especially if we have the people pleasing tendencies, we feel anxious or we feel like we're letting someone down if we don't reply right away. And that's just like it, let's just release that thought, that
Yeah.
idea of that we have to reply and we have to be accessible 24/7. I think that in and of itself, if we can really embody that and decide what our own boundaries are around that, can be a huge saver of our energy. It can really protect our energy so that we don't
Yeah.
get into this burnout state.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to name those two of like what expectations that we have or that society has placed on us, and recognizing that we're kind of in a reality that humans really haven't experienced before, the last
Yeah.
however many years. And really taking that to heart and recognizing that that doesn't mean we have to live by the technology that we have access to. Um,
Yeah.
But when it comes to like some tactical and tangible practices, I like to think about there's a few different ways to do it. So I like to think about your day, literally just one day at a time, and
Mhm.
breaking things down. I mentioned the energy givers and energy suckers. Like some for me, like energy givers for me is getting enough sleep, right? Prioritizing sleep.
Oh
Other
yeah.
givers for me are starting my day for me. I talk a lot about my morning routine, and mine may be more extensive than others, but you can literally spend 30 seconds to 2 minutes as a way to fill yourself up. I talk a lot about starting our day for you because, yeah, even if we get enough sleep, we could think like I'm starting full. I'm a glass half full kind of gal. But realistically, if we start our day, we just roll out of bed and go into it without doing anything that actually gets us to be connected to ourselves or present or intentional with how we want to feel that day, or just serving our being, nourishing ourselves in some way, we're not I don't believe we're necessarily starting full, right? Like
Yeah.
I think even if we got a full night's sleep, we're still kind of at this place where however our day goes, it's more of a reaction. Like we're just reacting to
Yes.
things, which can
Hmm.
kind of decrease what's in our cup, as
Yep.
opposed to if we start our day for us in our morning routine. And I'll share some examples of what that can be, that we kind of like bring ourselves up to full, so
Yeah.
that not only are we moving through our day intentionally, that we might react to things differently or might respond to things differently, but that we have more in our tank that won't be depleted as fast. So like really starting your day, that for me at least is a huge energy
Yeah.
giver. And I've lived a big chunk of my life where I would roll out of bed and go right to work, roll out of bed
Yep.
and go open a gym at 4:45 in the morning, or roll out of bed and go sit at my computer. There was literally no minutes for
Yes.
me. It just went straight to work. So I've lived that reality and I know how that feels. And I've also lived on this kind of other end of the spectrum where I have a fairly lengthy morning routine, and I've
Good
done
for you.
everything in between.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. The other things getting outside, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
sunshine or not, just like being in nature, huge energy giver for me in terms of even feeling the difference between I'm energized, but thinking more about just like the frequency of having fresh air and being in nature and feeling that connection to mama nature or just earth, or just getting
Mhm.
outside of the four walls of your office or your home that you're in. It's like a reset button that really serves me. And
Yeah.
again, as we were talking about thinking about the foods that serve you, I always
Yeah.
like to name this, that when we talk about nervous system regulation too, that caffeine, even though we might love our coffee or energy drinks or whatever you're drinking, that actually might be something that actually drains you, right? It might, because
Yes.
it might give you more anxiety. If you're someone that's
Yep.
struggling with anxiety, or you're in a heightened sympathetic state or season of life, it
Mhm.
actually might not be a true energy giver, even though we think caffeine gives me energy. So just being really, again, checking in with yourself and recognizing these things. And the same thing for the energy suckers of like, what people, is it like certain people that
Yeah.
you engage with, as whether it's family members or coworkers that you want to like set a boundary with and be like, okay, I can only talk to them for 2 minutes. And then I need to say like, I'm getting back to work. Have a good day, right? Like, what are those things? Same thing with foods there. Same thing with even like your rituals of like working out. Like, does working out in the morning give you energy? Are you more of a lunchtime? Does that give you that boost for the rest of the day? Maybe working out in the evening actually impacts your sleep. So you notice that that's not actually giving you energy, right? And all these things can really vary from person to person. But then starting your day with those kind of energy givers and suckers, it's like, how do you want to start your day, and what do you want? That's a question I ask all the time, because we can both share all the tips and tricks in the world and hope
Yep.
that something lands. But really recognizing that you're the one that knows you best, and you get to be the final deciding factor. And just because we certain things work for us doesn't mean they work for everyone else, right? So I think how you start your day, your morning routine, and some of those examples, simple ones, like the most simple could just be pausing, taking a deep breath, maybe 3 deep breaths, and saying, today I choose to feel, or my intention for today is, and just naming that like out loud, naming it in your mind. It can be that small, that simple. And it might seem like super small and simple, but our intention, like your intention is literally where your energy is being directed, right? And again, if we roll out of bed and just go into life, there's not really any where we're aiming. There's no
Yep.
intention present. So even just pausing and being like, today I choose to feel grounded, or today I choose to feel really productive, or today I choose to feel patient because I know I've got a lot going on and I'm going to allow myself to claim patience today. And just that intention setting and the breath, if you can add those breaths in, is a way for you to actually connect and pause, fill yourself up a little bit, so that as you're going through your day with that word or with that intention in mind, if something ruffles your feathers and your intention was patience, you have that signal already that you've planted, or that seed rather that you planted. So you can check in and be like, oh, yeah, patience. My intention is patience. And it might give you permission to like pause again, or to reorient yourself to react slightly differently than maybe you would if you didn't have that. So that's like the teeniest one that feels like a non-negotiable. It's anyone can do that, right? Other ways that I like to start my morning is, I mean, I have, like I mentioned, extensive. I do my morning warm lemon water for my gut health, and I do all these other things. But for me, presence and silence and mindfulness of some kind, and then movement and nourishment. So and they all really nourish in some way, but like nourishment for me, meaning like a nourishing breakfast, like an intentional meal. But starting with, as you talked about, we're so disconnected from how we actually feel. So actually giving yourself the space to notice how you feel, to recognize. And that could be through meditation, that could be through breath work, that could be literally sitting in silence and just letting your thoughts go through, and letting yourself notice how you're feeling in your body, noticing what you're stressing about that for that day, that can then maybe inform you of your intention for your day, right? But giving yourself, we truly can't hear our own inner knowing or our voice or intuition or connect with even how we're feeling if we don't actually pause and check in, right?
Yeah.
So much energy and focus is outward. It's like giving ourselves just that pause where we can focus inward. Not only can give us and kind of boost our energy bank, but it actually can inform us on what else we might need throughout the day. So like that starting your day is like chef's kiss, right? Is like starting with some sort of intentional presence. The movement I also love, it's like it is very from a physiological standpoint, can actually give us energy when we
Yep.
start our day with movement that can kind of maybe even boost our confidence and just help our clarity and our mental focus. So there's a lot of other benefits to that, to the movement as well. But I would encourage, if you're already moving your body, maybe you can add in a minute, 2 minutes, something very accessible of just presence and stillness before or after your workout, like enter kind of habit stacking in that way. um, the same thing with your throughout your day is like, how are you prioritizing your day? Talk about like time blocking a lot, or prioritizing your tasks, and recognizing, again, kind of this whole dismantling of like, we have to be go, 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 go.
Yeah.
Like, can you actually add in breaks in your schedule? Can you give yourself like an hour block instead of 30 minutes for lunch, where you can actually get outside or go do a meditation or stretch, or just like let yourself recalibrate, or maybe let yourself call a friend and get an energy boost from somebody that you love and that lights you up? Can you literally carve out time for your social time, or literally, again, just your me time? Can you really actually build that in, so it's not everything on your schedule is productive, or is maybe something that where it requires you to give energy out? Like, can you add things in and prioritize things literally in your schedule each day where you get to take in? And I know that at first for me was hard. Like, I would put it in my schedule, be like, wow, look at it, like did it. And then I would so easily just be like, get caught up in what I was doing and like totally forego that 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever I put in there. So give yourself grace, but also
Yeah.
like schedule it in, really build it in. And I also like to think about seasons of our life too, and how that gets to fluctuate. We are not robots. We are never meant to be just on 24/7 and 365. And so recognizing that we have our own kind of ebbs and flows, and some seasons where we're really going at it and we're really in this like productive, action, goal focused mode, and other seasons where we might dwindle, where we actually need more lulls and need more rest. And that's actually, we can honor, the more we connect to our body, we can honor those seasons
Mm.
to kind of regain, whether that's taking a vacation or taking a mental health day, or putting less on our schedule or not taking on more projects at work, etc., like giving ourselves a little lull. And really that also helps us tap back into our creative juices, especially as entrepreneurs, but like tapping back into our desires and our dreams and what we want, and giving ourselves that space to then get back into the taking action and goal. It's kind of like this beautiful cycle. I speak to it a lot in my mentorship program, but recognizing that we do ebb and flow and we go through these natural seasons if we allow ourselves to, right? And that's also how we prevent burnout. So
Yeah.
maybe looking at, the back half of the year or the next quarter and recognizing, like, is there a knowing around this is a season where I'm like, this is my go mode. I'm feeling the energy. I've got a lot of goals in mind. I'm ready to like just hit the ground running and there's excitement here. Or maybe you're really finding that resistance and like forcing and struggling mode. And that gets to be a signal of like, maybe I need to step back and actually let this next month, even 2 weeks, even day, like
Hmm.
be a moment for me to like rest and create more space and silence so that I can use that as my momentum to pick things back up when I feel ready. So that like cycling piece is also really important to recognize and start to like uncover in ourselves.
Yeah.
And then the last piece, so like morning, kind of how we're prioritizing our day, recognizing these seasons we go through, and then evening, just to really kind of dissect it simply, but checking into your evening routines. I'm sure we've heard or seen, the impact of being like on devices right before bed, but recognizing for you, like we might think that like scrolling on our phone or numbing out watching Netflix or TV feels like we're rejuvenating and we're resting. And now it can be if we're being mindful and we're actually present, or we are
Mm.
watching a show that we really love and we're connecting to the characters. It's actually a form of co-regulation for our nervous system. It can be supportive. But if we're mindlessly like just going and numbing out and scrolling, that's just another way we're disconnecting. And it's actually not resourcing us. It's not giving
Yeah.
us energy.
Yeah.
And having that honest check-in with yourself and recognizing, okay, yeah, I do want to scroll. There's a pleasure in scrolling, even if it's numbing out. Okay, cool. Maybe you do it at right after dinner and you give yourself space. And then past that point, when it gets closer to bedtime, you take a bath or you read or you turn off your devices, you do a
Yeah.
meditation. You create a different type of ritual that isn't scrolling until you realize it's 2 hours past when you wanted to go to sleep. And then you try to force yourself to go to bed and you get less of a night's sleep. So recognizing again what's feeling good and being really honest with yourself, I think, is the bottom line to all of this. Not only is what do you want and what feels good to you, but also really being honest with yourself and recognizing that maybe some of the practices that we have are actually more unsupportive, like kind of coping mechanisms or numbing mechanisms, as opposed to actually having you feel like it's supporting you, nourishing you, giving you energy. That was a lot. I
It was
just
a
feel like I
lot of
talked for 20 minutes.
fabulous information. Actually, I think there's so much in there, Emily. Thank you for sharing. I just wanted to come back to what you were saying about often people use success as a badge of honor. And I know I can very much relate to that. And I think it's often a source of validation as well. And when
Mhm.
you're seeking external validation, it's exhausting because you never quite get it. You might have it one day, but not the next. And it's almost an addiction. And I
Totally.
think part of that also, I think being busy all the time can be an avoidance of sitting with yourself because it's hard to sit with yourself. I think I know lots of people and I've coached people who are almost addicted to that busy drama
Yep. Yep.
because actually it's frightening to pause because there's lots of stuff that will start to come up. And I think the thing to do with that is you don't have to pause for 3 days and sit with it all. You can pause for 10 minutes. One of the things I'm such a geek is I love to go and sit in the garden and listen to the birds. So I know which birds I've got. And I'm very excited if I hear a new bird call and I'm thinking, oh, who's that? And the bird book comes out. But it gives me enormous happiness and calmness to just go and sit in the garden and listen to the birds. So if you are somebody who is thinking, I've tried meditation, but it's really difficult. Meditation is really difficult if you
Hmm.
try and sit for half an hour off the bat.
Hmm.
Nobody will manage that if you've never meditated before. Try 2 minutes. Try 2 minutes in the garden listening to the birds. It's a form of meditation. It's just a form of calming your system down and pausing without external stimulation all the time. And like you've said, and I think it's such a valuable point, of taking time for you, just a few times a day, starting the day intentionally. I like to meditate in the morning. I'm a heart math practitioner, so when I remember, I'll do a heart math exercise of really tapping into a positive emotion and feeling into that, and it changes the way your day turns out. I'm preaching to the choir here. This is when you set an intention for your day and you start the day from a space of feeling good, whether you're feeling compassionate or grateful or content, whatever it is much easier to navigate through a day when stuff starts to get thrown at you and there are complications that happen, because it's life. They don't go away. But when you come from a space of calm, and you talked about it, is you're able to respond rather than reacting. And I think it's so easy to go through life just being reactive all the time. It's why people are so stressed out. It's why people are burnt out, because
Mhm.
when you don't have a minute to pause and think, actually, is there a more appropriate way of dealing with what's happened? Or do I actually want to say no here, but I've subconsciously just said yes because that's my pattern? We don't change anything if we don't pause and have a gap. And you talked about when you can take a day or a week or a month, whatever it is for you, to have some downtime and some calm time. It is when creative ideas come through. You can't be creative when you're going at 100 miles an hour all the time. It's impossible.
Mhm.
And you need to create space for yourself, for new things to emerge, new insights to emerge, new ideas to emerge. And I think we make better decisions from a space of calm. And when you make better decisions, you start to, as we both know, you start to take your life in a whole other direction that serves you far better.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. I think it's nice to know too that for anyone listening, that at least for me, you heard kind of my go 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 mode, but the starting meditation or sitting in silence used to be like torture for me.
Yeah.
And now I absolutely crave silence. I crave it. So recognizing again of the reality we live in, we are constantly stimulated every direction we look without even trying to be.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that, as you said, like meditation might not be the right fit, especially as a starting point. And also you can start small and do 30 seconds of sitting
Yeah.
outside before or going for a walk. I always like to remind people, like, check into the things when you're putting things in your ears or you're engaging in stuff and you're listening. And maybe for that day you go without it. So like thinking about if you go for a walk and you always play music or you always play a podcast, can you at least give yourself the first 5 minutes of your walk before you put anything in your ears? Like give yourself those 5 minutes of just like being, noticing your surroundings, maybe hearing the birds, feeling the sun on your skin, like maybe noticing a cool neighbor's house that you hadn't seen in a while, like letting yourself actually be present before you start to take in any more information or energy.
Yeah.
And again, doesn't mean you have to do the whole walk without anything. It's just like give yourself a little window of that before you push play on something else. Same thing if you're driving in your car and you're always putting music or a podcast or something on. Can you give yourself a moment or a couple minutes of just nothing before
Yeah.
you add that to it? So just recognizing that there can be little opportunities to create these moments of stillness and silence that then can help you check in, and you might notice a thought that comes through that you wouldn't have noticed otherwise, or like a check-in of like, oh, my back's kind of sore, right? Like maybe I'm going to go home and stretch and or get a massage and book that. Like we get a lot more feedback about our needs and about what's going on inside if we give ourselves that space. And it can
Mhm.
be, I would like to present those opportunities as more accessible than sitting down for a meditation.
Yeah.
The other thing too is breath work can be a great opportunity that feels more accessible than meditation because you're doing
Mhm.
some intentional breathing.
Yeah.
You're thinking about your breath and you're breathing in a certain way, and it really still gets to serve your physiology and your nervous system. Because of that breath practice, you're able to shift things. So you're not going to
Yeah.
stay in that heightened state. It'll calm you down or whatever the breath you're doing.
Yeah.
But if you haven't tried breath work, but you've tried a meditation and that feels hard, I would invite you. This is a common thing I hear from people is that breath work was a way that they could actually let themselves kind of be present, slow down, and actually like sit, compared to meditation. So that could be another opportunity too, if you're feeling really called to add more of this kind of stillness, presence, intentionality into your world.
Yeah, amazing. And I think breath work, as somebody who used to be a creature who needed to be on the move all the time, it allows you to sit and rest, but also be doing something. And I think it gives a brain that's so used to being on the go all the time that doesn't know how to stop, a kind of an out for being able to sit calmly but still be busy with something that's useful. So very, very good.
Totally.
And I think breath work also is something that tends to allow you, like you've said, to access feelings that are there, and it's a wonderful way of processing through feelings as well. So if you're somebody who is a little bit worried about stopping because you don't know what's going to come up and out, actually breath work is a wonderful way of doing that, because you will find it comes up and it comes out in a breath work session, especially if you're working with a practitioner.
Yes.
I'm going to wrap us up, Emily, because I think we could probably keep talking for quite some time. Can you share with the listeners? I know you've got a freebie and you've also got a 15% discount on your app, where I believe there are some breathwork exercises people can access.
Yes, yes,
And you
yes.
have a course as well. Just talk to us about that.
Yes. So the freebie is the alignment audit, and that can be a really perfect step. Was we keep talking about like connecting to ourselves and actually giving ourselves the space to check in. It talks alignment's kind of been a buzzword recently, and it's like, what actually is alignment? Am I in alignment? How do I know what can serve me, and how can I support myself in kind of jumping back into alignment? And when we're in alignment, then we are much likely or much less likely to hit burnout or to kind of move down the path of that's not supportive. So it's a little video and then a little workbook page, where you can really tap in. So that could be a perfect first step for you to just do a little check in with yourself, or maybe think about things in a way that maybe you haven't given yourself the space to think about. So there's that. And then I do have my hype hub, and the hype stands for hone your power every day. So I really like to speak to like our ability to tap into the power that we have to shift our state, to shift our mood, to boost our energy, to calm our nervous system, etc. So there's breath work, meditations, movement, like yoga, mobility, even workouts in there. I like to say, just you get to pop in, push play, and support yourself, and pop out. And there's everything from a couple of minutes to like full 60-minute yoga classes and anything in between. And I also think it's helpful because when you pop in, you'll notice like the names of the meditation and breath are like breath work for motivation, breath work for sleep, anxiety, or a meditation for anxiety, or meditation for clarity. So it gives you, even if you maybe don't go in knowing exactly what you need, you'll see those lineups and you'll be like, what do I need? Actually, this is calling me. And it's going to be a way that also gets to keep serving this relationship with yourself, of where you actually get to connect and check in of like, what of this lineup actually is something that's feeling important to me in this moment today, which just gets to strengthen that muscle. So that's the hype hub, and the code podcast will give you that discount for the annual membership. So you have access for the full year at a great price. And then the course that you were mentioning, Emma, is my nervous system toolkit course. And so that one is it, as we were talking or mentioned a little bit before, of like, if we all knew the information about our nervous system, and not only just the general kind of nerding out on the science part of it, but also really how it applies to us uniquely, and maybe our own kind of programming that's been in place versus what could be, and doing some reflections and some workbook pages. And there's a whole laundry list of actual practices like the breath work and other somatic things as well. Like I think we'd all be way better off, and we'd be way more intentional about living our
Yeah,
lives from a more full, joyful, like flowy place, as
I
opposed to
agree.
kind of the reality we live in. So
Yeah.
that's available as well. It's a self-guided course. So you can pop in and kind of go through it at whatever pace you wish. And that same code podcast will offer you a discount on that as well. And I love connecting with everyone. So like, please, if you have any questions about these, or even questions that came up from listening to this, please reach out to me. I live mostly on Instagram, but I am on TikTok and other places. But please do not hesitate to send me a DM or to reach out to me. I'm so here to support you.
Fab. What's your Instagram handle, Emily?
Yeah, it's Bootbod. So
Boopod.
BOOPBOD.
I'm gonna pop.
And then yeah, that's the same on all socials.
Perfect. I will pop all of those links in the show notes. So folks, if you're listening and you feel called to go and connect with Emily and check out her stuff, please go hit the links in the show notes and go and have a look at everything. Emily, thank you. This has been a really wonderful conversation and so lovely to connect with a like-minded human and have what I believe are these are really important conversations to be having, because I'm not sure that enough people know that there are resources available to live life differently. You don't have to be in this hustle, grind, burnt out rat race mode. It's what we're told we have to be doing, but the truth is you can do it how you want to do it. And I hope that's the message that comes across from our conversation today.
I hope so too. This was so wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, folks. I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.